What my dudes, this is Mr. Gardner, and this is Math Time with Mr. G. We're going to be talking about completing the square, and all the completing the square is trying to find out where our x-intercepts are, or zeros, so they can be called x-intercept or zeros, and we're going to find them when they don't hit perfectly. So let's say it's between 1 and 2, and it doesn't quite hit perfectly, and factoring doesn't work. We're going to figure out how to find those exact points down to the decimal. So just a quick review on how finding the zeros works. We take our equation, we're going to set equal to 0. And then we're going to factor, and we're going to split up our x's, and then numbers that multiply to 15 are 3 and 5, and they add up to 8. Then we're going to take each binomial and set it equal to 0. Then we're going to subtract 3 from both sides to find our x-intercept, and 5 to find this x-intercept. So this graph is crossing between 3 and 5 and looks something like that. So my x-intercepts are -3, -5. So what happens if it's not perfect? So let's look at this guy over here. Factors that multiply to 30 are 1 and 30, but that doesn't get me to 4. Again, 2 and 15, again, not to 4. 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. None of these factors worked. So we're going to use a technique referred to as completing the square. So the first step we do in completing the square is that we are going to move C to the right. So we are going to add 30 to both sides. So now I have x squared minus 4x is equal to 30. So now we have to find our new C term. And to find our new C, our equation is we're going to take our B term, divide by 2, and then square it. So my B term right now is -4. -4 divided by 2 and square it. So that's going to be -2 and square that. It's going to get me to +4. So my step 3 is I have to add new C to the right. Because I just added a random number to it, I have to add it to both sides so that it still is balanced. It's just like a scale. If I have a scale and I add something to this side, I have to add something to that side too for it to still be balanced. So by me adding 30 to both sides, I did 30 to both sides. By adding a random number 4, if I randomly add 4 to the other side, it's still equal to each other. So now I have x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 34. Then my next step is I'm going to factor. So now I have x minus 2. And because it's completing the squares, they're going to be perfect, adding up to each other. So x minus 2 times x minus 2 is going to get me back to that equation up there of +4 and -4. And then the last step is solve for x. So I have a square there, so I'm going to square root both sides and get x minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 34. And then I'm just going to see if I can pull out anything from my 34. So I can do 34 and break it down. So 34 divided by 2 is 17. So no. So it has to stay just like that. And I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 34. And since that's my positive and my negative, I have found both of my zeros. All right, one more example. So my first step is to move my c term to the other side. And then I have 4x plus 12x is equal to 44. And I see a shortcut right away. Do you guys see how it's 4? There's a 4 in here and a 4 in here. If I do it to every single term, they're still balanced. So those are going to cancel. And then I get 3x is equal to 11. And those are just some easier numbers to work with. Also, I've gotten rid of this a term, which makes factoring super easy too. So, again, my equation is b divided by 2 squared. And then that can get me to 2.25. Because I put in 3 for 2, which gets me 1.5 squared, which is 2.25. But whatever I add to one side, I have to add to the other. Which means that when I factor, I have x plus 1.5 squared is equal to 13.25 squared. Then I solve for x, square root both sides, plus or minus the square root of 13.25, and subtract 1.5 from both sides. So, hopefully there's a couple examples. I know this is a little bit of a harder concept, so if you have some questions, just hit me up in the comments section. But other than that, be kind to each other, ask lots of questions, and think deeply.